Welcome everyone, we're going to get started. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from February 10th?
Minutes from February 10th.
A second.
That's Lori, motion, Chad, seconded.
Brian was busy.
Any further discussion of the minutes from February 10th? Any questions or notes? All those in favor of approving the minutes from the February 10th Senate meeting, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any you're just waiting.
I'm just waiting.
Any abstention? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Is President Schott not going to be doing this?
Well, I'll just point out that we started the meeting 4 minutes early, but.
At my time, it says 4:02.
I wasn't trying to be snarky, but I just wanted to say that I don't know. But we have a guest. We have a guest joining us. Oh, I was going to say, do you know where the president is? But
The president was on a phone call.
Anyways,
It's all right.
make yourself comfortable.
Started right on time.
Yeah.
Well, according to Stuart.
She had your, that's like every classroom.
Every classroom is like this.
My phone, the computer, the
I know,
podium,
right?
the wall, they're all different.
none of us want to say this.
They're all within 10 minutes, so it's kind of.
He's right over there. None yet. No, I was just
Okay,
taking
so-
excuses for the time.
Thank you. That's what a good provost does, make excuses. I want to start by introducing a guest, Andy Durajaye from Northern Kentucky University. Andy, say just that much about yourself and what you're doing here.
So I'm the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Academic Affairs at Northern Kentucky University. I'm part of a minority leadership initiative, and so I'm shadowing Linda for the next 3 days, but also she's my year-long mentor in the program.
Welcome.
Yay.
Would you mind spelling your last name?
First name is A-N-D-E. Last name is D-U-R-O-J-A-I-Y-E.
Great, thank you.
So it's always, a real privilege and delight for me to have somebody younger than I am think I actually know something. You all know that, right? That's why you teach, you have students. And, so anyway, it's fun having Andy here, and he's going to also, tomorrow afternoon, he and I and Gene Stallman will drive up to Salem and try to do something in a capital where the Republicans are walking out, or have walked out, or the Senate, I believe, walked out today. Other than that, I wanted to see what questions you have. Because last time I was here, I warned you that there might be that we knew there was going to be some negative financial news from the HEC, and that there might be publicity around it. And I'm happy to talk about what happened, but I thought it might be better, instead of me just guessing at what you'd like to know, just to let you ask questions or.
I have a question.
Yes?
Yeah. How much are these standards by which we look bad baked into HEC's? I mean, it feels like they're assessing us on different things than we assess ourselves and so on and so forth. To what degree do we have any flexibility to change their minds about how they assess us?
Yeah, thanks, Kendall. It's a good question. Sue's been in this system longer than I have, but my understanding is that under the university system, we use the metric that we're using now, the percentage in our reserve of our operating E&G budget. HEC began using these metrics a couple of years ago under a different finance guy, Andrew somebody, and then Jim came on board and he has altered them a little bit. So it's a little bit of a moving target. I think the most productive way for us to engage with this is what is the best way to assess our financial sustainability. And so we'll be having that conversation with our finance committee of the board and then with the larger board. We can do what we want to assess our own financial stability. We will continue to be subject to the HECS review every couple of years. So yes and no.
I mean,
And I think it's in our interest to try to get to a point where we look better on their indicators. But as you know, they include things like the unfunded PERS liability. So that's a tough one for us to do anything about.
but are we significantly worse on that one than other universities?
We are a little bit, we're the second in the state out of the 7 publics. We have the second highest percentage of employees in tier 1 and tier 2. And so that makes our liability higher. Other questions?
Well, I was curious if you had any thoughts about how the interaction with Jim Kirk went when he was here.
What do you think?
How do you think it went?
I asked first.
Jim's a finance guy in spite of his communications undergraduate degree. I felt like he was a bit tone deaf and a little bit emotionally insensitive to what he was walking into. There were a lot of questions that went unanswered, and if you're not very familiar with either the funding model or the ratios, it could all just kind of pass you by. I was biting my tongue a lot because there were a lot of questions I wanted to ask, but I wanted others to have a chance to ask. I thought it was great that that you and others got to hear them talk about how they value STEM. And I've been fantasizing about this dramatic production that we could do and have digital cinema students produce, where our students are like wearing these signs about how much money they're worth to the state, you know? I mean, I've had all sorts of thoughts after that. I know some people were quite angry after I talked to somebody in student life, and the whole idea of the funding model is just sort of repulsive because its assumption is that we at the university are motivated purely by this financial reward that we might get, and I think pretty much all of us didn't go into this work because that's the first thing we think of, and we're really here to help students. And I said to this person, I said, I bet when you sit down to help a student, you don't ask them what their major is and determine how much time you can spend with them based upon their major and how much they're worth to the university. I do want you to know that we are strategizing and thinking about how to attack this both short-term, medium-term, long-term. My phrase, the first few days, it was just anger and hurt. I've moved on now to what I'm calling productive anger. If anybody have a pressure cooker, like an Instapot or something, you know, they can either go along nice with the pressure, sort of regulate it, or if they get stopped up or something, they can explode, or if you take the top off. So I don't want to be the pressure cooker that explodes because I'm just so damn angry. I want to, have that level of simmering and just a little bit of steam spewing out. And I'm tired. I think that we're going to be more assertive about making our case. It might be more in their face at some points. And, I don't feel like playing nice and hoping that the HEC understands our value has worked very well. Sorry, Lee, I know you're a commissioner back there.
I do not represent the HEC.
And I'm thinking about where a little snarkiness might work best. You know, I mean, there's just a lot to consider, and that's what we're trying to do. But we are doing some immediate short-term things, and then we're trying to keep our eye on the prize right now. And the prize is additional funding for mission differentiation, hopefully at the end of the June meeting. So we don't want to do something at a higher level or at a different level that will alienate and make it less likely for us to get that result. So that's our primary goal. Lee, do you want to add anything?
Well, for
Sorry,
those
I'm
of
seeing
you
my
who
time
attended the
to
meeting,
distinguished
you know that I was not silenced by being there. So I would just say that I have sent some articles, not only from the Chronicle of Higher Education, but some of the Trends 2020 to all the HEC members, pointing them to things going on in the Chronicle and other places. Massachusetts is working on a model. Texas is refining their model. Several of the states are asking themselves, is the model that they're looking at and how they calculate the health of an institution working for the purposes of really meeting and understanding the answers of which they're asking and driving this question. So I don't know, we don't meet again until April, so we'll see. I did have one HEC member, Duncan Wise, reached out to me and said it was an interesting article, asked me about anything else, but he was the only person I heard from, so.
It was an interesting article.
It was an interesting article, isn't it? So if you're wondering which article it is, it's called The Odds Maker of the College Death Watch.
Oh, that one. I thought you meant the Oregonian article.
Oh, no, not the Oregonian, but that's a good, interesting, in its own twisted way article as well. This is about industry and experts who, armed with the data, are prepared to say whether or not an institution is healthy and what matrix they use for that. It was in the Chronicle on February 1st, and it offers some different models that they feel have stood the test of time, that some of these kind of shake the 8 ball and see what happens. Models aren't working well. And the article in the Oregonian kind of reflects the, oh, I heard this, and so I'm passing it along. It's out of context, but here's a number that may put this on a watch list for you. And it was unfortunate for SOU that it happened, particularly at that time because of preview weekend coming forward. But we handled it pretty well because we've learned to, like weebles, we wobble, but we don't fall down type thing. I'm dating myself tremendously.
So the article in the Chronicle specifically discussed a book that's coming out tomorrow called The College Stress Test. I already have it on order for my Kindle. But there's also a private company that's has developed called EdMyth, and they're going to try to make a business out of predicting when universities are in danger. And one thing I'm doing immediately is I'm having phone calls with the other presidents to say we need to be paying attention to the HEC role in this prediction of financial trouble for a university, because it's very dangerous. It has to be handled very, very carefully, or it can begin the beginning of of real problems for an institution. And, oh, by the way, I think it might exceed their statutory authority. But this is a conversation that we want to have carefully, and we don't want to jam it in, if we're right, we don't want to jam it in their face when we're asking them to give us more money.
Yeah.
Thinking about all that, of course responding. We have deliberately not put stuff out to the media, because we were advised by people who do a lot more media stuff than I do that it's better to just let the story die, that a lot of people didn't see it. We are getting the calls from people who did, but that a lot of people didn't, but that if we create another story, then more people will see it, and then they'll go look at the original article. So we're trying to be mindful of not causing more publicity. There will be a time, we have a couple of media outlets who are interested in doing something on the funding model. But I think we're best served by letting some time come between this story and then another story on the funding model. Okay, I'm gonna stop because I know you have other business, but please, if you have any questions, reach out to me or to Sue or any of us. And also, please reassure your colleagues. I think the thing that's probably the most painful for me, I heard that some younger faculty member asked whether they should start looking for another job. Please assure your colleagues that we're here, we're fine, we're proceeding deliberately, we have challenges like everybody else. And we're working our way through them.
Thank you, Linda. Sue.
I have nothing to add, other than
You have so much to
What-
contribute.
what Linda just said is really important. When I met with the chairs and directors on Wednesday, we talked a lot about how to message around this. There were several things that could have been better, it could have been in our favor in terms of timing. Concordia closing didn't help us. And I will just say that there wasn't a lot of daylight between Eastern's report and Western's report and Southern's. But Southern got singled out, as is often the case. But I just would say the same thing to all of you. Please reassure your colleagues that that nothing changed as a result of that article. Everything that we've been talking to the divisions and other groups about is exactly the same information, and it was just unfortunate. And can I just say that the insensitivity of, I'm sorry, Lee, the heck, around this issue was just heightened by the fact that they sent out their newsletter a couple of days ago, and right there in it, like they could control that, right? Right there was the link to the Oregonian story. So it's like Keystone Cops, and I'm just struggling with
You
it.
don't know if it's malicious or just,
But either way, it's unacceptable.
either way it can be harmful.
Those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Brittany.
Yeah,
Do we have a link to that ourselves?
To,
The Oregonian story? Did we ever get one?
I will
Oh,
not
it's
send it
on-
around.
Yeah. You can go find
Let me
it.
Google that for you then.
Well, I can, but I was wondering.
It was Saturday morning, and it's an article about Linfield.
A week ago Saturday.
Yeah, so the headline is Linfield, it is not about SOU.
So people had to read down a ways, but we did start getting calls and emails fairly quickly, so we know some people are reading the Oregonian. And then they tell somebody else, and they tell somebody else, and
Brittany.
Yeah, so I'll just,
Brittany's had her own fun.
yeah, this wasn't on the top of my speaking, but I'm gonna move it there. So, just an update, I'm gonna give it first a little disclosure that if you were at the meeting on Thursday, it was very heightened emotions and frustrating. But I would also remind you that we have to be a little strategic in this, because Jason and I then that next day had to go to the HEC task force. So a little bit, Jim was not exactly happy about the tension in the room, which could be insensitive, but also there's still work that needs to be done on this. So we can't come in with pitchforks stabbing the heck. So if you are, I would love for people to speak out and be more educated on the funding model, but please do that in a way that is also explaining why SU needs this and why it was a little insensitive without getting too upset, and I'm sure all of you know how to do that. But we still have a game to play technically. So there are 2 more meetings for the HEC task force. Our next one is about affordability. I'm not even going to get into it. I personally am going to advocate no to it because SOU would be disadvantaged in a lot of the models. They would basically reward schools who don't have to raise their tuition over 5%, which doesn't make sense if you don't get state funding, that you have to raise it and then you get more for not having to raise. There's a lot with it.
Go ahead and just beat the alien
Yeah,
horse.
I think yeah. So we have 2 more meetings, and we also discussed how we want to actually report to the HEC in May or June what the task force decided the problems were in the model, which was a little bit every school is playing for their own interests right now, which is not surprising. We're all in a position to be looking at our own finances, so we're all just taking carefully of how do we present this report to the HEC. So that's what we discussed at the last meeting. It sounds like we will be officially going to the HEC with the report of the task force either May or June. let me see. So just an update that since we talked about STEM, we did talk very heavily in a meeting about STEM, which we have been doing. I myself am not a STEM major. I have nothing against STEM majors, but I do think the model rewards a lot of STEM as if it is the most valuable degree to get. And they do frequently mention liberal arts college as if they're not going to be around much longer.
Unemployable.
Yeah, and
Our
so
graduates are unemployable.
we've definitely talked, like Jason and I have been very vocal. UO came very strong at that one, that STEM is not the only important division. So it's not just a small true advocating for this, it is a big right now. So I think there was a lot of conversation on the table about STEM, as well as those target populations. So that's where we're at. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, are there STEM people there participating?
100%, most people in the room are either like finance or have a STEM background, or, I mean, let's look at OIT. 100% when we bring up STEM, they are the definition of STEM. They get very
No,
diverse.
it's only one representative really and one backup from each university.
From each university?
And they're,
Yes.
you know, finance and
Right,
other
okay.
types, yeah.
Yeah.
But what Brittany, I think, OIT is voicing the
The-
preference for
And,
STEM.
and
so is
OSU, they have a
OSU.
very heavy engineering program. So like, there are people in the room who do that, but also it's just a mixed conversation, I would say. Something we talked about, which Jason and I strongly advocated for, is that they reward STEM, as we've been over in all 3 areas of the model, and something we said is like, they only reward those target populations once they get a degree. Why are they not putting them and rewarding them every credit they take, activity-wise? And their argument to me was that it's a return on the cost they had to put out for the cost of STEM programs, right? So then our argument was then take it out of outcomes. Take out a degree of someone getting a STEM from that. And the room got really quiet and no one really addressed it. But I would say the good part of this is we talked about reports, and it's sounding more like every school will be able to write their own small take on the model, which will be very beneficial, because if it wasn't going to be that way, it was probably going to be outnumbered on some of the areas we're trying to fight for. But also they're going to be probably giving to the HEC potentially the minutes to what our task force has been talking about, which I would say shows a lot, because there's times when something will be brought up and it gets kind of hushed. And in a report, maybe all those things can't come to light. So in the minutes, it'll be really clear to see SOU keeps advocating every meeting for a potential problem, or UO does. So we'll just see how it goes, but I will say, while it was good that the HEC put out the financial report, everyone does kind of see right now that SOU needs something to change in the model, and that's at least a bright side to this, and Jason and I brought it to the table. I think I said it at Jim's thing, that this should be a document then sitting on the desk at the funding model allocation committee. If they're going to write a review that this is where we stand, then put it on the table when we ask for more. So is there any question about that before I move on to another contentious issue? Okay. Oh, yeah.
Quick question. Thank you, Brittany,
Yeah.
for doing all this for us. One question just about the timeline, and I think Linda mentioned this as well. So this is your task force is going to report to the HEC in May or June, and then what happens with
And
this?
then basically the official report is going to be identifying kind of like, we're giving to Jim, hey, this mission differential needs to be fixed. This whole multiple line items that feed only directly to one school is not beneficial, for an example. Jim will take that and discuss with different HEC members, all right, what are our options then for how do we do this? A couple schools want to run some actual numbers if we were to do these changes. So my understanding is it's going to go to the HEC with like ways to possibly change it, which will then post May or June. If they decide to do them, they'll look at actual like how do we change this effectively.
And if it were changed, it would go into effect for the following month.
Yeah.
We still have, regardless, we still have next year to get through.
Okay.
But one of the things motivating them to take action sooner rather than later is that several commissioners, we believe, are going off, although now I'm hearing that some may be reappointed.
Well, it's a 2-year, or a 2 consecutive term limit, and so I'm not sure about the reappointment piece. So for those voting members, they can only stay for 2 consecutive 4-year terms, and then they must rotate off, and those rules were established for the state. It's not just the HEC. But as far as the May or June hearing this report, we haven't heard yet whether or not there's schools coming to us requesting tuition increases for next year. So schools that haven't been before us for this biennium may use this option of coming forward. Typically, schools that have already been before the HEC for the first year of the biennium have not ever requested a repeat increase of over 5%, so we've never heard that before. But there's always a first time, right? But in August we meet and we put together our POPs, or priority pieces that we put forward to Oregon. Like, these are the things that we think should have priority for the governor's budget. And that would be the funding model. Would be great if we were going to tweak it to put that into that aspect of looking at it then under the microscope, so we can talk about the money it will take to fund higher ed differently with this new model, or appropriately, maybe is the better word.
And then, so the next one, I'm just gonna read my notes and then I'll take questions afterwards, because I'm sure there are some. So last time I was here, I told you that we would be meeting that Wednesday to discuss our allocations. So on February 12th, the committee that allocates had a 5-hour meeting, and they had to member cut about $310,000. So there's 41 line items that we had to fund, which is about 4.3 something million. 36 of those line items were all cut, anywhere from $1,000 to $25,000, and there were 3 programs that were defunded. On February 18th, we had a public hearing for anyone that either was defunded or just had a cut that they were not feeling that they could operate properly on. So we heard from the Siskiyou, National Student Exchange, EPIC, all of the resource centers, outdoor program, cheer, and ICC. Of those that appealed, we had 8 budgets appeal, which was the Siskiyou, National Student Exchange, all of the resource centers, and outdoor program. And basically, just some background on this, because I want it really clear, like, why this was made. And I think this has been, I know when Linda's talking strategically, this has been my kind of thing, that a lot of people may not be seeing how the funding model is actually affecting my student fees and why we have to do this, which it 100% is. If we were covered more by the state, certain line items could be taken over by the general fee. But right now, it's either tuition raises to cover it or student fee raises or cuts to fund it. So this is just where we're at. So of those that appealed, the difference between what they asked for and what they were allocated, basically the amount that they're either looking to get back, is about $76,000. So I'm just going to put that into context, that I'm sure you all know this, but of the amount of news reporting I've had to speak to and talk to people about, this is a really hard thing to look at. 41 line items that are all very, very beneficial to a student. Some that are commuter students who are never here, and this is maybe a program that keeps them in school, or a program that keeps an on-campus student as a freshman here and retains them over years. These are all extremely important. So cutting $300,000 was really hard for this committee and was not easy. And the fact that now they're looking at having to appeal $76,000 worth, they're going to go through that same work again of who gets cut. There's no way we're coming out of this somebody not getting hurt. 36 line items out of 41 were cut. It wasn't just the few defunded, it was everyone taking a hit. And we knew coming into this that unfortunately this is where we were going to have to be. So I just want that on the table. It would be really beneficial for you as professors if you have someone, a student, talking about this with you. It would be really beneficial to me if you could also explain our side of this, of where we're at this year. We're not the bad guys, and we're not trying to do this, but we have to. This is what we were elected to do. So it's really not easy when a student is picking us as like, we chose to do this to them. And I would really request as professors, if you hear a student do this, it would be great in your position to speak light to that and talk about why we had to, and not just, so to say, point the finger at ASSU mad. That's not very nice, and it's not very appreciative to student government if that happens here on this campus. So we will be this Tuesday meeting to review the appeals and deciding what happens next. Either appeal is granted and we find funding in some of the line items, cut someone else, I don't know what'll happen. But then whoever, because it's that $76,000, any other budgets we change to fund those appeals, they then have 7 days to appeal, because that's now affecting their budget. You get how repetitive this is? So we'll be meeting this Tuesday to do that. So I'll give an update on when that happens and where that's going, but it would just be really beneficial, and I'm sure for all of ASSU, because I'm the face of the org, so I'm totally fine with taking the punches from this, especially in like the newspapers and media and stuff. But the people who sit at the table who are maybe new to this, they feel, for lack of a better word, like jerks. They feel like the bad guy. And so these are like students, and I think this is one of those things that other people don't realize, that like this is a student that had to sit at a table and look at line items and go, who doesn't get funding? And I know we're looking at some of the very ones that didn't receive funding, but I can give you numbers if you'd be interested in who was cut. Child care subsidy got a $40,000 cut. From my experience of 3 years here, that keeps student parents in school. We've had student parents drop out and email us that they drop out because they didn't get that money. So there was a lot of people hurt in this, and we know that. So this is where I would then say, on March 13th, we're having a town hall with Senator Golden and Pam Marsh. That's a really good one to come to. And this is where I would speak to, while the HEC is the one that decides the funding model, the more people we let know up there where we're doing, how we're doing, in all areas of the campus, which includes the student fee, would speak volumes, I think, when they're deciding the funding model. It's not like the HEC and the legislators don't talk. Salem's a small town. They can walk over the building. So I would just advocate that if you can be there, or encourage your students to be there, or even, I know this probably won't happen, but if you really want, I would love to come do a class rep for 5 minutes and introduce myself and just say, if you are affected by this and shed light to that, I'd love to do that. So that's that. If there's any questions, I have numbers ready with me to give you whatever question you may have. In my free time at midnight, I like to look at my spreadsheets and run a lot of numbers, so I have answers ready. So.
Well, at this point, we're about 13 minutes behind schedule. Brittany, can you remind everyone what your email address is if they have questions?
Yeah, it's just ASSU president, or you can reach me on my personal, sharp, SHRP, b1@sou.edu.
Thank you, Brittany.
Yeah.
Kimball's going to try to catch us up quickly.
Can I ask you one question?
No, we can't. We got to move on. You can email Brittany after.
But,
Dennis,
but
no.
where can we get the information about what you just mentioned? Besides emailing you, is it posted anywhere or for?
Are you looking for like the allocations in total?
Yeah.
I don't know for sure if we posted those publicly. We sent them to all the clubs. I'm happy to send them to Andrew to distribute to all the faculty when they like it.
I would love that.
Sure, yeah, I'll send it.
Kimball.
Okay, advisory council mostly set our agenda today. You'll hear about several of these things, so I will just skip right to, I think the only thing that isn't directly on our agenda is the elections committee is in progress. It's kind of elections committee report 2. We're just about all set on our faculty personnel committee elections. We are going to stagger some terms to be 2- and 1-year terms to try to get a better spread through the years. And that's, we're heading on to chair elections. Okay.
Thank you. Moving on to new undergraduate curriculum. Just as a reminder, we have a package of new courses, most of which we will discuss today. We have some folks from those programs to answer questions. But one particular item, we will have a request to waive the 2-week rule for Science 120/120L, which is the course that we discussed last week, or 2 weeks ago, so that we could hopefully approve that both as a hard-numbered course and as the G-strand course. So for now, questions, who's here? Jody, are you undergraduate? No, Kenneth.
Well, I think Anna's chair,
Yeah.
Sherry's here to speak to the science course, and I can talk to whatever else.
Just give a summary of the highlights of what's going to be.
So I don't have my laptop in front of me because I spilled a glass of water on it.
But as you can see in there, we have, this goes back to things that we covered back from December, so this is about 2.5, 2 months of stuff now. We have new courses in there for the most part. I can't list anything to you, I'm sorry.
Do you wanna see?
I'm trying to look at it.
A bunch of CCJ
Yes.
courses, DECIM, and a couple of ES.
I mean, for the most part, do you have questions for me, I guess? There's music course, the science classes, yeah.
And could you say a bit more about the undergraduate certificate of music industry, because I know we heard from the graduate version.
Right, so that is essentially the same, it's just the 400 level version versus the 5.
I'm actually going to speak to this a little bit. There's been a lot of confusion and a lot of discussion around what constitutes an undergraduate versus a graduate certificate. There's actually no such thing as a graduate versus an undergraduate certificate. There are undergraduate students who complete a certificate and there are graduate students who complete a certificate. And they may engage in the curriculum exactly the same way depending on their needs. A graduate student has really no good reason to take an undergraduate credit unless they want to pay less for those credits and not receive those credits toward their degree, but they may choose to do that. An undergraduate student will not likely enroll in a lot of 500 level courses because they won't have the prerequisites or have the class standing. But the certificate itself, for our purposes, and depending on who you talk to, and this is timely, more importantly for HECS purposes, a certificate is a certificate. So, because there is undergraduate curriculum as well as graduate curriculum in this and some other certificates, they go to both bodies, but they're the same thing, it's one certificate.
Thank you,
It
that's
would
very
just be
clear.
taking the 400.
Thank you, I practiced it.
Any other questions about the curriculum for us?
I have a question. What would be the most helpful motion to move things along?
Well, specifically, the only thing we need to address today is the SC 120. So the first thing we need is a waiver of the 2-week rule to approve that course.
I move that Lori moves that we waive, no, I move we waive the 2-week rule.
And Lori seconds. Any further discussion on waiving the 2-week rule only on the Science 120 course package? All those in favor of waiving the 2-week rule for Science 120, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the 2-week rule is passed. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to.
And Laura seconds. Any further discussion on Science 120 being approved as a hard-numbered course? All those in favor of approving Science 120, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that course is approved. Thank you. Before we move on to the university studies approvals, are there any other questions for our guests who came to speak to any of the undergraduate curricula, or otherwise we can release them and vote on that in 2 weeks?
And if you have questions, email me because I have all my notes in my office.
All right.
Oh, maybe we're getting into the university studies, but are we eventually going to approve SC 124?
Yes, that's the next agenda item. I just want to make sure, because I didn't know who was here for.
That would be a course.
Yeah, just want to make sure that there were all questions. Yep, all right, we are moving on to that part then. So we have the university studies proposals that came forward, which include Science 120, but also included COM 218 and ES 353. So all three of those are open to approval as a package. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Brian motions to approve. Lori second. I saw Lori first. Any further discussion on approving COM 218, Science 120, and ES 354 for university studies? All those in favor of approving the university studies proposals, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. The university studies package is approved, and you can email everyone you need to email about Science 120. All right, next up, we had a vote on the new graduate curriculum music industry certificate. Well, now here's a funny thing. So.
Should we wait for 2 or would vote on that one too?
So since we now know that they are one certificate, whereas previously I thought they were two, do we need to do a waiver of the 2-week rule to approve the undergraduate curriculum so that we can approve it all together?
Well, I'd say need is a strong word, but I can imagine a situation in which the recommendation from graduate council would be considered any differently from the recommendation from curriculum committee. So like I said, I would never advocate for need, but some measured consideration.
Cross some
is
T's,
always-
dot some I's.
So I guess my question then would be,
I will motion to waive the 2-week rule so that the 2 certificates that are actually one certificate are then approved together.
Michael Stanfield seconds. Any further discussion? Do you all feel clear on this question of the music certificate, which we did discuss 2 weeks ago, but the undergraduate versions of the course?
Can I just ask, what's the need for being the 2-week rule?
What happened is the graduate curriculum came forward 2 weeks ago, but the cross-listed undergraduate sections of the courses weren't before us. So we actually did review all this 2 weeks ago. It's just technically.
The course numbers are 400 versus.
Right, so the 400 versions need a waiver of the 2-week rule vote on that. Any further discussion? All those in favor of waiving the 2-week rule on the music certificate undergraduate cross-listed courses, please indicate so by raising your hand as you already have. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The 2-week rule has been waived. And so in this case, I think all we need is a motion to approve the entire music certificate package.
So,
All right.
second.
I heard Brian second.
Brian.
Okay.
There we go.
So Mark first, Brian second. Any
Did
further
that time
discussion on the music certificate, both graduate, undergraduate? All those in favor of approving the new music industry certificate, please indicate so by raising. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Certificate is approved. Thank you very much. We caught up on some time. Bless you.
Thanks.
All right, yes, that was a vote wrong. All right, we are now to the proposed resolution in support of Trustee Rosenberg. As you all know, we discussed at the beginning of the term the question of whether or not the Senate should take some kind of vote of endorsement or approval, something in favor of Trustee Rosenberg's reappointment. Again, she has been appointed for a 2-year term. Her term will expire in June. She has applied to be reappointed and is only eligible for 1 more term. So that is before us. It's subject to the 2-week rule, so basically.
That's 1 more 2-year term,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Was there anybody else that put their name forward?
No one has come forward to us as a part of this discussion. Now, of course, anyone who's a faculty member at SOU can apply directly to the governor anytime they want to without telling us. But no one has indicated their intention to do so.
Would we ever know if somebody put their name forward?
I guess not.
I mean, the only fear that I have is
If they were appointed.
if we, put forth this resolution and then, one of our colleagues put their name forward without knowing about this or whatever, then it seems to be stacking the deck. If nobody else done it, then I'm all for it, just woohoo.
Well, I discussed some of this with Sabrina Prudhomme, and basically what Sabrina said is that it would be unlikely for the president to appoint a new candidate if a sitting board member who Sorry, what did I say?
You said president.
Yes, thank you. The governor of Oregon would be unlikely to appoint a different trustee unless there was some indication that that trustee was not doing their job well, just because it is a high learning curve. And unlike the other trustees, the faculty, staff, and student appointees are on a 2-year term as opposed to a 3-year term. So again, they have less time in the position overall. So basically what happened, as the process has been described to me, the governor calls the chair of our board and says, what do you think? And the chair will likely say, well, we're happy. And the governor's likely to reappoint trustee Rosenberg. But Deborah has asked our support. She basically said that she serves at the pleasure of the faculty and wants to make sure that we're happy. So that's what I know.
I would just say that it's not a secret that we've been talking about this, and it's been in the minutes. So, I mean, anyone else who wanted to put their name out there, and I mean, they could have contacted us at any time. So.
Well, again, so this will come back in 2 weeks. If, I encourage you to bring it to your faculty and ask around. And if there is someone who is really eager for the job and would feel insulted by this, we can reconsider. But I think primarily this is sort of an opportunity for the faculty to state that we think this person's doing a good job.
Since we have caught up a little bit, I would expand my original. We did discuss this at advisory council, and everything this all came up a little bit, just are we biasing against an unknown other candidate and all that. But the thing that was kind of amusing was reading somebody, I don't know who, before they really funny, like 55 whereases and therefores kinds of resolution for supporting trustee Rosenberg. And we did agree as an advisory council that it needed to be shortened. And so what you see in there is our shortened version of a draft letter of support from us. So, yeah.
Any further thoughts for the minutes for us?
Just a clarification. I think some time back when we were discussing this issue, we were debating about the wording. Are we endorsing it? Are we supporting her candidate? How are we placing this?
The draft language is there. It says in support. Yeah, sure. Draft Senate resolution in support of trustee Deborah Rosenberg's reappointment to the university board. Whereas trustee Rosenberg has served admirably on Southern Oregon University's governing board, whereas trustee Rosenberg is eligible for reappointment by the governor, whereas trustee Rosenberg is eager to continue her service and continuity of governance leadership benefits the university, therefore be it resolved that the faculty senate supports trustee Rosenberg's reappointment to the board of trustees of Southern Oregon University.
Yeah.
So supports.
Yeah, supports.
It doesn't necessarily say recommends or endorses, it says supports. So we could certainly change that language, but that's where we put it for now. And again, my understanding is that there is precedence for this. I never did locate when that vote took place, because it'd be deep in the minutes somewhere. But a number of people have said they recall a Senate discussion and some sort of vote of confidence in Dennis's reappointment at that time. So there does seem to be precedent. Any further comments or questions from that? All right, now we're ahead of schedule. Moving on to the update on bylaws work for professional track promotion standards. We have both Kimball and Karen Stone in the house to discuss this work.
Great. So I'm sure both of us will want to say something here. We're also working with Leslie Eldridge, an instructor. This was a task force named by the provost to honor the part of the APSU collective bargaining agreement memorandum of understanding to try to have a collective bargaining agreement, definitions of workload and so forth align with the Senate bylaws conditions for instructors specifically. also known as professional class. I'm gonna say instructors, it's just easier for me, for their promotion guidelines. And so we have done some work. What I want to know is how many of you have the colored version. Should we maybe try to bring that up, do you think, Karen? I think it would probably be helpful, because this was,
I'm not sure who's going to, I think that was up when we got here.
so I'll give Karen a moment to try to find these things.
See if they're still logged in on Facebook.
So just a little bit more framing background here. When the Senate bylaws, conditions for promotion and tenure were created 10-ish plus years ago, it was prior to the current definitions of workload in the collective bargaining agreement. And at that time, 10 years ago, the hope and expectation was that instructors would be providing service in comparable amounts and qualities as do professorial track faculty. What we now realize is in the collective bargaining agreement, all of us, everybody's on a 45 ELU workload. For professional track faculty, 44 or 43 of those ELU are dedicated to teaching, and therefore 1 or at most 2 are dedicated to service, compared to professors for whom a typical loading is 36 teaching ELU, with 9 ELU dedicated to a split between scholarship and service. Long story cut short then, it created a situation where our bylaws were demanding of our instructors, in effect, much more work than they were being given time or being paid to do unless they did overload. You're getting a little bit of my spin there. But I think pretty much both sides in the bargain agreed that we had to do something. And so what the task force was tasked to do, and we're well on our way to making some recommendations to, well, eventually the Senate, but I think first this needs to go through the Constitution Committee, is to restructure the expectations for instructors that make it possible for them to meet the criteria to be promoted from instructor to senior 1 and from senior 1 to senior 2. So with all of that in mind, Karen, Leslie, and I got together. I think we started in the fall, if I recall, late in the fall, and we've been meeting kind of periodically since then. And the basic concept, the philosophy that we put into this was to say, okay, well now that instructors are mostly teachers, and only a small sliver, frankly, is dedicated to service, that it didn't make sense to evaluate each of the 3 stools, as we, in their case 2, in terms of the various categories of acceptable, preferred, and exceptional. Rather, it made more sense maybe to do that with teaching, but definitely not in the service area, because as the collective bargaining agreement makes clear, if an instructor is loaded for 44 teaching, the 1 ELU left over is dedicated to program service only. And by fiat, that would mean they could only meet acceptable, as it's defined for tenure line faculty. So what we thought would be a better way to go is, in trying to do the least change, we're not making any recommendations to change on professorial track. This is all about professional track, is to split that out in the bylaws so that there's a section for how professors get meet their criteria to go from assistant to associate to full, and also in there how to get tenure. That would stay largely the same. But what we want to propose some changes in structure for how instructors do this. And what we pretty much said then was, let's take more of a checklist approach rather than a grade them out as, you know, A, B, C or whatever. And so for service, it would say pretty specifically, you would meet the service requirement as an instructor in a year with you are 44-1 if you do good stuff in your program, you do the service within your program, and that's it. And then if you were on the 43-2 track, which is a choice that instructors will eventually have, it's sort of being put into place as of this year, then first ELU of service, still dedicated program, meet all those conditions. In that year, your second ELU would be dedicated to typically some sort of university service, and then you would meet, basically, you were on an active committee and gave good service to that committee. So it's kind of a checklist thing for instructors. This is our concept. And then, as far as teaching, we more or less, again, instead of trying to categorize things, we used a lot of the same language, but still more of a checklist. We made certain progress in sort of the way your teaching is evaluated, not just through student evaluations, but through other things. These were some of the same words that came out of our boxes currently in the bylaws for everybody in teaching. And then a little bit of a ratchet up from, okay, so some set of conditions for teaching for instructor to senior one, and then a little bit more addition reflecting your hopefully enriched experience to go from senior one to senior two. Oh, okay, we got to cover this. If I talk long enough, yes. So this is in the Senate folder, but Karen's created this, I think, nicely designed document. And what you're seeing is our concept. We already realize some wording things might have to change. But what we would want to do is put into bylaws language what you're seeing here. And I think what she has up there now is sort of our list for teaching expectations to go to senior one.
So yeah, the teaching expectations, the top part is meets the teaching expectations to senior one. And then the second half of that sheet is meets the expectations to promote to senior two. Okay, so we didn't create, as Campbell said, we didn't create new language. We just reorganized it. And this color coding shows where we grabbed the language from. So if you look at all of the yellow came from the current table in the bylaws under the acceptable column. Anything that's green highlighted came from the preferred column, and anything that's that turquoise color came from the exceptional column. And so you can see that for senior promotion, teaching expectations, promotion to senior instructor one, almost all of it is coming from the acceptable column with a little bit from preferred, like share successful, innovative practices, etc. Then if you scroll down, the meets teaching expectations for promotion to senior instructor two, everything that you saw for one, but we've also added in, we pulled some of the things coming from the exceptional columns, okay, in the bylaws. Again, the same wording though. The one thing that we did add kind of at the bottom is that, you know, in the table, professorial have flexibility. You have three legs of the stool, right? You can be an acceptable, preferred, and an exceptional, or you can be three in the preferred. You can kind of balance out that workload. Here, we were trying to give some balance for professional, but also recognizing that almost all of their time is dedicated to teaching. So it's not really, their time isn't really balanced across the three stool legs. It's almost all teaching. But we wanted to have a caveat down here, and that if you don't quite make that bar for this, it could be offset if you exceed the expectations of service. And so that's what that's speaking to at the bottom.
And before you leave this slide, Karen, I wanted to point out that even in the advisory councils through President Schott and others, and actually some of the feedback I received, when we look at the four things that are in exceptional, our group initially thought those all sounded reasonable enough, but I will say that I've had President Schott point out that last one, mentors colleagues to develop their instructional abilities, etc. On reflection, I think, and this is, you've heard me say this, Karen, but you were there when President Schott talked. That one's a little tricky for some instructors in some programs, so we might want to jigger what we've got
I think
there.
we talked about calling that something else and then putting mentoring as a bullet under it.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
such as
Right.
mentoring colleagues, and then just heading it a different thing.
So our goal was not to wordsmith this with you all. We wanted to give you the kind of the idea of it and see if you like the way we're going. And then if you all give us mostly this looks like a good direction, what we would want to do is take this, put it into bylaws, propose amendments and forward it to Lori and the others in the Constitution Committee. That's kind of where we see the process going.
If we get anything else under teaching that you guys want to ask or talk about? I'll point out the part that this is the nearly outstanding, right, in this section here. That came up in advisory, and we just said, don't blame us, that's the current language. So we didn't try to fix it. Again, we were just pulling those sections. That's something you guys want to take on, feel free, but we weren't just trying to change the language. We were trying to align it with the CBA. Okay. And we do know that there's a task force that's out there that, that could be all different completely. If we go to service expectations, now, these aren't organized in the same way. It's not like you're trying to meet one standard for senior instructor 1 and a different standard for senior instructor 2. But in this case, it's what model have you picked for kind of that year. As Kimball mentioned, the teaching expectations for professional track are either 44 ELU or 43 ELU, or something less than that if you're being released from courses, like if you're a program chair, or you're on a big committee or something like that, you have the ELU release for. So we wrote this as, here, you're meeting the service expectations for this 44 teaching 1 service ELU model. Or the next one is you're meeting that 43 and 2 sort of model. Again, you can see the yellow part is being pulled from acceptable. This is really the program level service that is currently in the bylaws. And with the 43 and 2 model, it's that program level plus a little bit of that university level. And then the bottom part, now you'll see some turquoise, because this is pulled from that exceptional column, because this is where we're outlining if you would exceed. What does it look like that you would exceed your annual service expectations? Remember, that's the little star in the under the teaching expectations, that this could substitute for not quite making the bar for senior instructor 1 or 2 under teaching. This is what exceeding service would look like. Again, it's not to say that you might be getting ELU release for it. Again, being a program chair as a professional faculty member might put you in this bucket, but you are getting release for that program chair. And then I think down at the bottom, what we were envisioning is that in the bylaws, there would be a recommendation that professional faculty each year in their FBAR are reporting on basically which model they fell under in order to keep track of it. Because if you can imagine somebody then going up for promotion, the first year they were 43 and 2, and the second year they were 44 and 1, and then, keeping track of what is the expectation would be important, so that a professional faculty member could be evaluated with the correct rubric once they go up for promotion over 3 years down the line. Yep.
I asked several professional track people in my department this year, are they 44-1 or 43-2? They've never heard of those things. Is that not yet promulgated? They didn't know.
Yeah, and again, it's partly, if you look at the actual loading, then, the 44 and 1 and 43 and 2 is a bit of a, does it really exist? Because a lot of people are something not quite that. Part of course, the problem is that we finished this negotiation, this part, in the summer, which was already after planning had happened and the terms about to launch. And it's going to take a little while to actually iron out. And what does that really look like? Yeah.
So we're asking them to report in their FBAR, but they don't even know what they are.
I think that it's important that maybe it's that they document how many ELU they were dedicating to service. Basically keep track, and whatever that looks like, so that we're not holding you to a higher standard than we ought to be, or we're holding you to the right standard. And so more than anything, probably document it.
Aaron, you make a great point that this did sort of come up late and after loading was already determined for this year. Do you think as part of the bylaws work that's going to need to go into not only sort of addressing the promotion process, do we also need to create some process by which, or deadline, or whatever, because the faculty member gets to determine. And so does there need to be a process in the bylaws that says, you know, by this time you must inform your chair, I'm opting for
Yes.
two, you know, so we probably need to address that as well.
We talked about that both in bargaining and after the committee started meeting, much earlier than we have in previous years, and past practice, because they need to know so that they can tell their chair in
Right.
advance, and then go through elections or whatever
Right.
process it
You know,
is.
big kudos to Brian, because he reached out to me and said, you know, I'm on the elections committee. Well, maybe
Committee on
just
committees.
on committee,
Fall.
yeah, sorry.
In Marianne, too.
Committees, but just for a few more weeks, right?
Till
Yeah.
Precious gets out.
Counting the days down. But he remembered in a chair meeting when we had talked about, hey, we need to see our committees earlier so that we know if the professional faculty are serving on something, so that that can be incorporated into their teaching schedule. And the teaching schedules are pretty much set when we do course budget planners, and oh, by the way, they were due today. So, you know, we're gonna have to work on all of our processes, but I understand that it's even hard to get our committees, you know, they're not probably all full for this year. So it's, I think, a big cultural thing, but we do have to work on it. Otherwise, I mean, the purpose of this is so that we don't overload our professional faculty to take on these service, you know, duties.
So was there any discussion, oh, by the way, thanks for the kudos, and this is awesome. But as I'm looking at this, I think to go from senior instructor, to be promoted to senior instructor one, you need one at acceptable and one at preferred. So if a faculty member is a 44-1 for their entire time, if they are just doing the acceptable level of service, which is their job, that basically forces them that they have to be preferred teaching? Is that how it is? Okay.
Well, that's what that is, yeah.
Okay, but there's no other way that they could bump up the service as preferred without going above their job, right?
Well, you mean
Like doing more work than is required
currently
of
right
them.
now, or in our proposed?
In either one.
Our proposed gets rid of the categories of acceptable, preferred, and exceptional for the professional. Gone.
Gotcha.
So you really have two different rubrics, one for professorial and one for professional. So we're just setting the bar for professional, for, you know, teaching for senior instructor one, and then it's a little bit higher for senior instructor two, and then there's a bar for 44 and 1, 43 and 2, although we're not sure those exist. So,
They will.
yeah. Dennis had a question.
Well, I don't know who worked on this, maybe after the last CBA agreement, approval, but wasn't there an intention to rank committees based on their time commitment?
We do, well, we have a
And it-
ELU allocation.
Yeah, and is
basically
that
for
part
the-
of this whole discussion here? And then does it
No.
apply to full-time professor at that?
That's not part of this discussion, that was part of the negotiation discussion, and that table is posted to the Provost website.
And we promised to revisit it.
But that's part of the negotiation process.
So it wouldn't apply to, say, a committee of significant service or something, that the type of language that's in here, those ranks, those type of committees.
I think that there's a correlation,
Yeah.
you know, but it's not like, oh, go to the Provost website to see the list, you know? But there, I mean, you could look at EOU voting, and, you know, that is related to perceived workload of those different committees. Mark,
In the weeds, but that's the kind of way it
that's
is.
where we live.
So, a professional track, in our department, we teach 4 credit classes. So if they teach 10 classes, they're at 40. How do they do the rest of their job by serving on extra committees?
Well,
Or
there are-
if they serve on 11, if they teach 11 classes, they're already at 44. And if they do some stuff, then you got to pay them. I'm confused by.
So they can do, if they did 11, then the only expectation would be programmatic level,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So if they choose to, oh, I'm the coordinator certificate and I get a little bit of something or other, what they can do is overload that, bank that until they have that for ELU to get out of one course one year.
All right.
Or they could, you know, or, and like I mentioned in advisory last week, there's very, very, very few people that are right 11 classes at 4 ELU.
Right.
You know, we have every rendition of, we have a lot of 4 ELU courses, but we have people that pick up irregular registrations or teach a 5 ELU load or a 2 ELU load or every combination.
Okay.
Other questions? Comments? Any feedback on this from any of our professional track colleagues in the room?
So just to clarify, so instead of doing the 3 categories for evaluation, it's just trying to get over kind of a minimum bar, like basically accumulating these different kind of checks.
Yeah, so you would be looking at, if it would be teaching and you're looking to promote to senior instructor 1, this is the section, and however it gets modified, you'd just be looking at, okay, those are my teaching expectations. And then if you want to say, all right, well, what about my service? Then what did I kind of fit into here? Or, but you do a lot of other things, and so, but you have ELU release for those. It's a matter of documenting, I think, you know, that all your colleagues are going to be reviewing that, hey, I met the expectation of my service obligation. And then, boy, if you have any of these down here, highlight them, even if you don't need them to get over that bar in the teaching, but it's always just a good thing. Yeah. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah, and so it's a little bit more cumulative than just like you're fitting into one of these.
well, definitely cumulative, because promotion is, right? You're looking at probably a 5 years accumulation. But the tricky part is that, again, in any one year, you might be more or less, for your service might be more or less. And the expectation of service might be more or less, because you might have more or less teaching. So you've got to document that through time, because we're not locking you into like professorial where they've got 36. There's variation for professional. Makes it a little more complex.
Any other questions or comments?
I don't remember, that's a good question, is this averaged over some set number of years, like 3, 5, 7 or something?
Well, promotion to instructor, you know, you can apply in your 5th year. For promotion to senior 2, you can apply in your 6th year. So that's in general the block of time that you're looking at.
I'm just wondering if it's like not weighted evenly, so if there's a lot of service at one point, but not recently or something like that. Just reflection, that's all.
Right, you know, I think, I don't think it's any different than probably right now in the bylaws. But, and typically, yeah, you see some people, they serve on some big committees, they might get burned out, and then they don't, and then they come back, and then they, you know, but I think you're looking for an accumulation, but that's the job of the committees.
I'm sure we're gonna be percolating on this for many more months, at least another month, so I'll reflect.
Okay.
Well, we would appreciate it maybe in writing an email if that's more comfortable. Send Karen, me, Leslie, any feedback you have on this, because we're trying to put together something to hand to Constitution Committee as soon as possible. And I don't mean like tomorrow, but I mean over the next week or 2. We'd love to kind of push this off of our plate, frankly. And so,
Yeah, please do bring this back to your faculty, and also, you know, I acknowledge that as non-tenured individuals, professional track faculty may feel less happy to put their name on an email saying, I'm not happy with this. Feel free to send me thoughts, and I can take a name off of it and send it your way as well. Send it Kimball's way, I mean. So, you know, we definitely want whatever feedback as this goes into a constitutional process. Eventually gets vetted before we approve anything, obviously. But,
I'll just add, the other thing is just, like, kind of how do you want to see this? Does this work like we pulled it away from professorial? So what I would envision is that this becomes a table, you know, with teaching with senior 1, senior 2, and then the service, 44 44 and 1, 43 and 2, and the exceeds expectations. So, if you're okay with that kind of, not the words going into the table, but at least what we can do is draft bylaws language, which has that format, and then you guys can argue over or agree or whatever about, what goes in those boxes. But if we have that draft language and we hand it over to Lori as the Constitution Committee, and then when you guys decide, hey, those are the right words, or Paul, those are the right words, then you're good to go. But, if we can get a sense for, hey, we like kind of the layout you're talking about, but we have to think more about the words, then that gives us a direction to go to.
Well, thank you both for your work on this,
Thank
and I think Leslie as well. I know this has been a contentious issue in the past, but
It's good to be working together.
yes. All right, well, we're moving on to announcements and new business. I actually wanted to start with a quick issue related to bylaws and promotion. I'm on a colleague evaluation committee. I'm chairing one for the first time, and I was reading the bylaws around that, and there's one thing in here that I thought was interesting and maybe worth some revision, is that the evidence, this is in bylaw 5.363, it says evidence for class visits, committee members should visit each distinct course taught and the term evaluated. When possible, visiting 2 different class meetings of each distinct course is recommended. The faculty member I'm reviewing is teaching 5 courses, which would mean 10 observations, and I asked my other 2 colleagues who've done a lot more of these than I have, whether that's normal, and they said, "Oh, just ignore that." So I wanted to bring that up as something that to me, it sounded like an excessive amount of observation, especially for a faculty member who have every reason to believe is doing an outstanding job. And I wondered if maybe we might want to address that when possible, visiting 2 different class meetings of each course is recommended, and maybe tweak that language a bit. It seems like pretty, a lot of surveillance. Any thoughts on that?
Heavy load for the cite that again, please.
It is 5.363C is the bullet. Yeah.
Okay.
And what I was told by my colleagues was that the custom had been to each member of the committee to observe 1 class at one time, and that was always fine. That's what I recalled from my own evaluation, but I didn't want to be in a position of putting my colleague in a bad situation with their review because we didn't go to enough classes. But
way back when, the intent was across all the committee members. So like if you had 6 observations and 3 committee members, they each do 2 of them. 10 with 3 or more would let you divvy it up some, but the idea was just seeing 1 class. You might see a bad day.
Yeah.
Or you might see an exceptional day, but to see 2, you get a better picture of what that course might look like. So y'all can change it, that's just kind of what it came to.
Is there anything about online classes?
What's that?
Is there anything about online classes?
Not there. It does not say anything about how to do a class observation for online course, which also has come up in the term-by-term question a number of times. How do you what is the proper procedure for observing online? That's a good question. Any other announcements or new business?
On Thursday, from 4:30 to 6:30 in the Road River Room is our annual School of Ed Alumni Mentor Night, where all of our former students who are now teachers and administrators in the Valley come back to give their best advice to this year's crop of brand new teachers. We have pizza, they practice interviews, and a good time is had by all. So if you happen to be walking past the Road River Room between 4:30 and 6:30 on Thursday, poke your head in and see the best and brightest of our Valley's educators. Have a slice of pizza, encourage them, tell them they'll all get jobs. Maybe see some of your former students there being all grown up and expert. It's always great to see them come back confident and clear, and it's really a fun night. So if you have even 5 minutes and that's of interest to you, poke your head in, we'd love to see you.
presence on campus. It is the CCJ locking event, which is like a 19th year, I believe. So there's been posters outside between the two buildings that will be used, or Taylor Hall and the SU. I believe, what time is that, 12? It started 12, and probably over around 6. So there's that, and then there's a social science alumni panel, which is 3:30 to 6:30 in the Meese conference room, where we have the best and brightest from the Rogue Valley come and speak of their stuff.
I got one. Women's and men's basketball playoffs start, women on Tuesday night, and the men on Wednesday night, both playing Warner Pacific.
Is that tomorrow and Wednesday, those weeks?
I have another one. If you haven't seen it on Inside SOU already, my digital Sona students are doing a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo with a $6,000 goal. We've raised in 4 days, $5,480 already. I am getting a pie in the face for that, by the way. They had a goal, if they raised $4,000 by the end of the weekend, I would take a pie in the face. They raised $20 more, Chris Lucas will take a pie in the face. And Brandon Gibbons, if you know him, our staff member who runs the Digital Media Center, he has given the stretch goal that if we surpass our $6,000 goal and raise $7,000, he will take a pie in the face. His pie is a little more valuable. So, it is being done through the SOU Foundation, so it is a tax deductible donation if you check that out. You can find it through the Inside SOU banner, it has an ad about it, and then, or if you're on Twitter, you can go to @Crew Experience is the Twitter account.
So I'm collaborating with CATTLE, the teaching center for teaching and learning, and we're doing a meditation workshop on Saturday in the Meese room from 9 to 4:30. It's free, open to the public. So we already have over 90 people signed up for it, so it seems like it's going to be a really exciting event.
Wait, 90 people in the library?
Yes. It has a room for at least 100. So.
So will we be on the floor?
No, there will be chairs, yeah.
Well, I just love meditation. I just kind of picture us with our legs
So you do have to
crossed,
register
you
to
know.
do it?
Yeah, there is a registration link. It's on Inside SOU, I believe. Yeah, so.
Anything else? Look at that, we were getting done a little bit early. Adjourned.